My name is Zach Arnold. I'm a Hollywood film and television editor, a documentary director, father of two, an American Ninja Warrior in training, and the creator of Optimize Yourself. For over 10 years now, I have obsessively searched for every possible way to optimize my own creative and athletic performance, and now I'm here to shorten your learning curve. Whether you're a creative professional who edits, writes, or directs, you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're a weekend warrior, I strongly believe that you can be successful without sacrificing your health or your sanity in the process. You ready? Let's design the optimized version of you. Hello and welcome to the Optimize Yourself podcast. If you're a brand new optimizer, I welcome you and I sincerely hope that you enjoy today's conversation. If you are inspired to take action after listening today, why not tell a friend about this show and help spread the love? And if you're a longtime listener and Optimizer OG, welcome back. Whether you're brand new or you're a seasoned vet, if you have just 10 seconds today, it would mean the world to me if you clicked the subscribe button in your podcast app of choice. Because the more people that subscribe, the more that iTunes and the other platforms can recognize this show, and thus the more people that you and I can inspire to step outside their comfort zones to reach their greatest potential. And now on to today's show. One of the topics that I get questioned about constantly is networking. How important is networking? Can't I just get really good at my craft so my work speaks for me? Because frankly, I hate networking. And how often do I really need to do it? Today's guest, Emmy Award-winning editor turned director Kabir Ahktar, feels very strongly that, as he states, it is really important to stay networking. However much you're doing, it's probably not enough. Kabir has built his entire career through networking and creating genuine relationships, not to mention constantly practicing his craft and doing the work, no matter if he's getting paid for it or not, as you will learn about in our interview. His work includes Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Never Have I Ever, Arrested Development, and the Academy Awards, just to name a very select few. As a 3-time Emmy nominee, Kabir won the Emmy for editing the pilot of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and he has now transitioned to directing full-time, having directed 12 episodes of TV in the last season. In our conversation, we talk about the skills that Kabir developed and the challenges he faced in building the career that he now enjoys today. We dig into the psychology behind building successful relationships and also the perseverance that's necessary so you can keep your head in the game and have the confidence to forge ahead regardless of the setbacks. Now, just to note, this is the third in a 3-part series with editors who have successfully transitioned to director. And if you want to listen to the previous 2 parts, just go back to episode 125 with David Rogers and episode 126 with Andy Armaganian. If you are looking to advance your career, sharpen your networking skills, and learn how to play the long game, Kabir drops more knowledge bombs than I could keep track of in this interview. He is a wealth of knowledge. If you are inspired by today's interview and you would like to up your networking game so you can get the attention of the right people who can help open the right doors that lead you to a more fulfilling and rewarding career path, but your outreach email game is a bit weak, well, then I invite you to download my Insider's Guide to Writing Great Outreach Emails. In this extensive and free, by the way, guide, I'm going to teach you why cold outreach is the most important soft skill that you must develop if you want to advance your career, which is important now more than ever that we are all stuck at home and cannot network in person. I will also show you the 5 most common mistakes that people make when writing their outreach messages, and I will bet that you've made at least one of these yourself in the past. And then finally, I'm going to break down step by step in a simple to follow checklist how you can structure an amazing outreach message that is going to provide value to your recipient, help you build a lasting relationship instead of feeling like, you're just bothering this person, and actually get a response to your outreach so you can then seek advice, connect with a potential mentor, set up lunch meetings, and possibly even land your next gig. If you would like to download this brand new guide for free, just visit optimizeyourself.me/email guide. And that's all one word, no dashes, /email guide. All right, without further ado, my conversation with Emmy Award-winning editor-director Kabir Ahktar, made possible today by our amazing sponsors, Evercast and ErgoDriven, both of whom are going to be featured just a little bit later in today's interview. And as a quick sneak peek, ErgoDriven has a brand new product that I'm super excited to share with you. To access the show notes for this and all previous episodes, as well as to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspirational interview, please visit optimizeyourself.me/podcast. I'm here with Kabir Ahktar, who is an Emmy-winning director and editor. Your work includes shows like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Never Have I Ever, Arrested Development, the Academy Awards. That's just to name a few, not to even mention some of the bigger names that might be coming very, very soon. You're a 3-time Emmy nominee. You won the award for editing the pilot of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And now, one of the things we're certainly going to talk about today is that you have transitioned to directing full-time. And in fact, you directed 12 episodes of TV last season. And the one thing that you left out from your biography is that you and I have been trying to get this call in the books for at least 7 or 8 years now. I've kind of lost track. It could have been 7 because I didn't have a podcast, but it's been a while.
It's been a while.
A pleasure to finally have you here and finally get this conversation on the record. I'm really excited about this. So thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, of course. It's funny. You're right. I have left that out of my bio somehow. I feel like
How is that? Right?
I know. I should just update my website and include also has been trying to hang with Zach for like a decade.
I agree. It's a big piece of the puzzle. It really, really is.
I can't even remember where or when we met. You know, sometimes you really remember where you met a friend or whatever, but I can't remember. I don't remember a time that I didn't know you or where.
I agree.
Happened. Do you?
I feel the same way, where if somebody were to say, when did you meet Kabir? I can remember 50 different times we've bumped into each other, had a conversation and chatted. I have no idea when the first time was. They all just kind of blend together.
Yeah, because, I've been in ACE, 2020 now. So I've been in ACE for 6 years. But I feel like I knew you before then somehow.
I think so, yeah. I think that it probably started, if I had to venture to guess, it was maybe when I was a speaker at Edit Fest in 2011. That might have been when you and I just kind of maybe got mutually introduced or said hello or whatnot. But since then, it all just kind of blends together.
Yeah. My first Edit Fest that I went to, I spoke at in probably 13. So
maybe it was later than 2011. I just know that the first time I spoke, I talked about Burn Notice, and I was working on Burn Notice around 2011, 12, somewhere in that area. But it was probably, my guess is, I would venture to guess that you and I met at Edit Fest. I don't remember doing it because it just seems like every Edit Fest, I check off my list, saw Kabir again, and we chatted, right? And at any other ACE event or whatever, we always bump into each other and we get to chat. But now we get to do it for real.
Tried to make plans and then it didn't work yet again.
Exactly. But we finally made it work. It only took a global pandemic for both of us to find the time on our calendars to have this conversation. And there are 1.5 million threads that we could pull and we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. But I think the value that comes with talking to you and sharing your story with people is helping them better understand first how it was that you just got into this industry in general. Because my guess is that with your Indian heritage and background, that your parents or your culture or your extended family were not all saying, you know what, you should really get into Hollywood because that's just what Indian kids do, right?
So funny.
So let's start there.
Well, it's funny because my parents moved to this country right before I was born. And, they're living the, Indian American, they're not Indian American at all. They're living the Indian dream, like move here, doctor, nurse, eventually drive German cars. That was the plan and it worked for them. And yeah, for sure. I remember as a little kid, my parents were definitely like, so you're going to be like, maybe you'll be a doctor. And I'm like, no, as a little kid, I was like, no, I am not trying to cut things open and deal with blood and all this. And I remember my dad saying to me at some point, I must have been in elementary school. He's like, well, that's not the whole thing. He's like, that happens for a little part of medical school, but there's lots of types of doctors that don't do that. And I was like, well, you already just said it happens for even part of medical school. So forget it. I'm out of here. But, they have always been extremely supportive of whatever, me or my sister were trying to do. And, it's funny because both of us ended up in creative fields. She's a creative director and graphic designer and does a lot of gigantic ad campaigns and illustrations for the New York Times and who knows what. And, I do this. It definitely happened kind of by mistake. I tell the story a lot, but I was in college and it started off at Penn in engineering because I was like the math and science kid. My whole childhood, I'd been like the math and science kid. And I realized quickly that was not for me at all. I was like, this is I like watching the Discovery Channel special on how they made this bridge, but I was not cut out for that sort of work at all. But, a friend of mine pointed out to me late in college, he's like, you do loads of theater. He's like, that's all you do. He's like, you're in theater more than you're in class. And not just in college. I was spending 70 hours a week sometimes in theater dealing with lighting design for a long time, then directing by the end of it. It was just it was interesting that he said it. And I never thought of it as a career possibility. And I didn't really think of myself that way. But even in high school, I spent every Saturday in high school, 12 hours, like in the auditorium, like, which I'm pretty sure, most normal people don't do. But he was right. I loved it. I'd always loved it. And, having been a communications major and being a theater fan, being a movie fan, it really made sense when he said it. And it was weird because I was like, oh, let's try it. And I mean, so far, so good.
Well, what I'm curious about is if I were to tell my story, it starts with what has become kind of a very common story for people, especially those of us that are either millennials or Generation X, somewhere in that kind of zennials, whatever it is that you want to call us. And we all say the same thing. I was running around the house with a video camera and I was doing VHS tape to tape and I was just putting all this stuff together. And you're saying I was in theater and I was doing lighting design and I was doing directing. So it makes a lot of sense to me how you ended up where you are now as a director. But I'm really curious, what was the transition to, I want to be all by myself in a dark room?
I, first of all, reject, as you should too, the stereotype of editors working in dark rooms. I for years was dealing with, the guff you get from crew friends who'd be like, go back to your dark cave. And I'd be like, no, my office has windows. And I realized at some point, I was like, the people working on set are working in the dark cave. Not post, but production is working in the dark cave. Post is working oftentimes in like nice offices with, like facilities. And yeah, no, as a hardcore extrovert myself, obviously it's a terrible match for aptitude wise. It sort of happened kind of by mistake. The seed I realized at some point much later was planted in like high school. I had like my old Mac, the early 90s, and I'd gotten like a microphone attachment for it because it seemed like it would be cool. And the mic had like a line in plug and you could, I wired it up to the CD player that I had and would just like record stuff off of CDs and just started like, slicing bits of songs together and making little like basically mashups, right? Just for myself, just for fun when I was like 15, 16. And I remember a friend came over one day and I was showing him some of the stuff and he was like, dude, you could get paid for this. And I think at the time we were thinking like, yeah, I guess they run these kinds of little things on the radio sometimes. And they're like, coming up next, the coolest songs of 1991. They'll like play like a quick smash of them and be like, you're listening to W whatever. That's my East Coast giveaway, right? W.
Mm-hmm. I grew up east of the Mississippi. It's all W's for me too.
Yeah, heck yeah. W squad for life. I'm making a W sign. It's funny because I didn't really at the time I was certainly not thinking about picture editing or working in narrative content or any of that. But then in film school, one of the classes I took was a post-production class. It was up first. And they had just gotten this brand new thing, right? They had just gotten an Avid. And I'll tell you, it made perfect sense to me. Just like getting my hands on it, I was like, yep, I completely understand this. Very strange. It's funny how sometimes you just, encounter something that feels like it's a part of you out in the world. Maybe it's a piece of art or maybe you like have, gone to some house and you're like, yes, this place is for this, like, this is apartment is perfect. This is me. And when I found the first interface with Media Composer, I was like, yes, this weirdly is me. And, the professor saw that and he made me the Avid TA at school. Which basically meant he wrote my cell phone number on a piece of paper, stuck it to the wall, and said, day or night, people, if you have trouble, call Kabir. Which meant that I would get calls. I'd be at parties and get calls. People were like, I'm trying to drag through the sequence and it's not playing like the little bits of audio that's supposed to, and just having to figure out, like learn and remember being able to tell people, like caps lock, it'll turn scrub back on, stuff like that, or helping people with like drive management over the phone. And like sometimes I would come in and like, have to figure this shit out because I was getting paid like, $500 a month. I was getting paid to do this. And, because in my career, I never was an assistant editor ever, but I did that for, that time in grad school. And then I, moved here and got a job at a little production company and the same thing, me and my friend, AJ Dickerson, some of you listeners may know him. We were roommates for 4 years when we first moved here and we kept each other in business, ping-ponging jobs back and forth, down the hallway, which is great because we were able to keep each other paying rent, which we both needed. But we would work these little jobs where there was like, one editor, no assistant. We just had to figure it all out on our own. And for me, a lot of the time, he knew a lot more than I did. He had worked in post-production facilities for a while during school. And like I was just like plugging like think everything into every slot until it worked. It's kind of my approach.
Well, this brings me back to a memory that I haven't thought of for years, but very similarly to you. I wasn't paid as like the TA or the tech expert, but I got to the point where I had such a reputation in like the edit bullpen where they had all the student edit bays. I basically lived in mine. And I was at the point where the professors were coming to me by my senior year and saying, Zach, I'm teaching this class right now and I don't understand how to do this thing with Avid or Final Cut. Can you just go in and can you demonstrate this? Because I can't figure it out. I wasn't even getting paid, but usually you would check out an edit bay for like 4 hours. I was given the key for the semester. They're like, this is just your room because you always check it out like I'd slept in there. And I'm not advocating any of that, by the way. It goes against everything I talk about, but that's where I started, right? But that was the way that I used to live the lifestyle of the editor. So I can totally relate to all the random questions, being your own tech support, being an assistant editor, which I think is one of the components of why, similar to you, I only was an assistant editor for 5 months of my whole career, which I want to learn a little bit more about. Because as you know, people say, I'm sure they ask you all the time, how do I get into scripted? Well, I've been told that I have to take a step back and be an assistant. And I'm just always like, no, you don't.
You don't.
There isn't one way to get in the door. And you clearly embody that you don't have to be an assistant first. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
I completely agree. It's funny, like the key takeaway, just to wrap up what I was saying, the key takeaway for me from that was that, I just never told anybody that I couldn't do it. I felt like that was a piece of information that was not worth offering to people. Like, until the point that somebody would come along, nobody, thank God, nobody ever asked. So like, hey, you know how to do this, right? Before we hire you. Like, it's stunning to me, even today, how infrequently people ask simple, like direct, short questions like that. They're like, hey, so by the way, you've edited a half-hour show before, right? Or any narrative content show before. I, worked on a show at some point with an editor who got hired who had never done a half hour, who had never done a 1 hour, and who had never worked on Avid. But he got the job. He just didn't tell anybody he couldn't do it, which is like stunning. But you also have to be careful. One of the great pieces of advice I was given by one of my mentors was to be careful that you don't let so smart, I wish I talked like this more, was to be careful that you don't let your success lead your skill level. You want to make sure that your skill level is ahead of your success, or at least like commensurate. You don't want to like suddenly be succeeding and getting like opportunities. An example that I say, this is my example for everything, but it's like, suppose I got a call tomorrow, right? To be like, hey, this is maybe not a great example, but like, I got a job offer to be the DP on the new Star Wars movie, right? Like for a second, you'd be like, oh my God, that's fucking awesome. But I'd be like, I do not know how to do that job, And there are people in the industry who will say, yes, I'm going to do that job and I'll figure it out as I go. But the opportunity for failure is so much greater there than the opportunity for success. And not just, screwing up the job, but also then like all the people who were involved in hiring you knowing that you screwed it up, that you weren't prepared, you weren't ready. And that is very hard to erase over the next several years as you're trying to figure out, go back down to whatever level you were at or should be at, or where, you feel comfortable. And, that you got to tell people. You got to tell people that you did that and that you failed. And like, there's nothing wrong with failing, but it's hard to recover from, reputation wise.
Agreed. And one of the things that I talk about with the students in my coaching and mentorship program, because there's an opposite side to this that's very dangerous, which is perfectionism. Oh, I'm just not ready yet. I have to wait until I'm quote unquote ready,
right?
Which means they're overly prepared. And what I always explain to them is you need to set yourself up for success on day one, meaning do you know just enough to not drown on day one and be in a position to figure everything else out. You being a DP on Star Wars, massive failure. You walk in and you're like, what's the gel? What's a crane? Like, what are you talking about? Who is this guy?
Yeah.
But as an editor or somebody that was your own assistant, like I know the one of the transitions that I made that I've talked about many times is the time that I transitioned into TV on Burn Notice. And
was that your transition point right there?
That was my transition. So according to everybody and looking at my resume, that was my overnight success story, right? It took 10 years, but that was my overnight success story. But one of the very innocuous, very innocent questions that was asked of me by the post producer was, you're comfortable with Avid, right? Yeah, sure. No problem. I hadn't touched Avid in 10 years. I learned Avid, but I had been all Final Cut. And this was the original Final Cut, not the newfangled Final Cut X version. But I knew and I believed in my ability to figure it out They weren't hiring me because I was an Avid technician. I was confident I could tell their story. I knew their show. Could I use the tools? It was going to be a couple weeks. It was going to be pretty bumpy. And one of the things I remember, very distinct memory, is that the assistant editor that they had assigned me at the time thought that he was probably going to get that spot that I ended up getting to fill in.
Interesting.
So that this young kid with no scripted credit at all, that's now in the editor's chair, my first week I walk into my assistant and I say, can you show me how to make an audio keyframe? And just the look on his face, like, are you kidding me? But I knew that all the little stuff I could figure out, but I had the confidence in my skill set to cut the show and tell the story. So as long as you can set yourself up for success to not fail on day one, you can learn the rest of it. But I don't want people to fall into the trap of, but I'm not ready yet. Right? Because like for you just jump into things and you figure things out.
Yeah, I think that, that I have always had a certain amount of, cockiness about that, which is, a certain amount is healthy. There have been times that I had too much and it did not go well. It's like you try sometimes to take 2 steps forward and you end up taking, you can end up as a result taking 2 steps back, 2 additional steps back from where you started, which is 4 steps back from the 2 you took for. You got it. But
I get it. Math and editing, that's why we chose to edit.
Yeah, exactly.
But I get it.
But it's you definitely have to be careful. You don't want to over succeed too quickly and, without support. And I feel like that's an important thing that, is not talked about that often. I directed my first half hour I directed was in 2008. It was a show that I did abroad, a British half hour. And, I was really excited. It was I felt like I'd been ready for it, was really looking forward to it and felt comfortable doing it. But I did not sort of have the structural institutional support career-wise to maintain that level of support. I did not have relationships with the studios. I didn't sort of have the right relationships with agents. I sort of didn't know enough of the right people who would continue to hire me on other similar jobs. And I didn't know enough of the right people to say, hey, I did this show, watch it, check it out, and who could then be like, oh, great, come do this other similar thing for us. So in a way, I sort of went way up real quick and kind of came right back down to the level I was at right before. It wasn't like a big crash or a failure. I was just like, it was sort of an outlier. It took a few more years I spent really working to develop, a scaffolding or a superstructure to be able to be like, okay, well now I've not only risen career-wise, but also have, some stability here. And enough people know about it. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but so a huge key to success in this industry, of course, is relationships, right? And reputation. I always say there's 3 things. You got to be good, you got to know people, and you got to get lucky, basically.
And my belief, if anybody that listens to the show on a regular basis knows that I freak out whenever I hear the L word, because the L word is always used as an excuse. Somebody can listen to your story. We're going to get deeper into it. Oh, well, Kabir got lucky, or I just got lucky, which ascribes all the control to external circumstances. And I just believe that luck is the intersection of hard work and opportunity. You can control the hard work and you can control building the relationships that thus create the opportunity. The only thing that's lucky is the timing.
Yes, completely.
So you'll have somebody that'll spend months and months unemployed. Then all of a sudden, randomly, they get a phone call. Hey, are you available? Oh my God, I got so lucky. A job came my way. Yeah, but if you reverse engineer it, there are 27 things you did beforehand that created the phone conversation. The timing is what's lucky. Other than that, you create your own luck.
Completely. And I am fond of saying that you got to do things to increase your chances to have certain things happen. My stupid example is that, it's by getting struck by lightning. If I said, hey, Zach, we'll give you this job, whatever, if you get struck by lightning. You're like, well, okay. It's hard. It is hard to get struck by lightning. Most people have not been, but also there are things you can do to improve your chances, right? You can, you can hang out in Los Angeles. You go somewhere where there's a lot of thunderstorms. You drive up a mountain and you wear a pointy metal hat and you do a bunch of stuff that obviously we don't recommend you do at home. But
full disclaimer, don't try to get stuck by lightning.
Yeah, but you can improve your chances, right? So in a way, yes, I mean, photons and so on, but you can improve your chances of getting lucky, but you still have to get lucky. I say this all the time, every one of us has had a fortunate timing break. There have been shows where I was hired on that I was dying to do that I know for a fact that I was their 6th, 7th, 10th, 11th choice. But, the proper confluence of events, this producer was late to this meeting. And like, so somebody else got to suggest me first. And like, they asked a bunch of other people to do it. And those people all said no. And like, I suppose you could sort of list it all out, right? But just as a catch-all, you're right. I mean, I would just be like, you need some fortune to smile on you, You can create some of that, but some things you need to get some breaks.
Well, I love this idea of how do I take whatever actions are necessary to increase the probability as high as possible that I can get struck by lightning. I love this. I'm going to turn this into a whole thing. I love this this image, this philosophy, and I want to talk more about what you did to ensure that your probability was as high as possible, that you were going to make the transition first into editing high-level scripted television as you did for years. So let's go back to that point.
Sure. It's funny because I do feel like my career has been really made up of a lot of turns. I've gotten lucky a bunch of times. You could say I created a lot of that for sure. I do take pride in having lined them up, but like you also, it's just a fact. Like every single, Tom Cruise got lucky at some point. Chris Nolan got lucky. Like they all are very talented and they all work very hard, but like some things just had out of their control, had to line up their way. And good for them. It's true for everybody, who's succeeding in some way. I mean, look, some people are lucky because they have like a super famous dad. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know. And then they get to do their first feature when they're 26 and good for them. Anyway, well, you talk about like assistant editing also. Like I feel sometimes I look back and I'm like, I could have gone the assistant editor route. Maybe when I was like 25, 26, I could have really been focusing on, I piled up enough editing days. I could have gotten into the union, which I, avoided until I was in my late 30s. I could have found an AE gig. I was working on like, reality documentary series with some editors who would be like, screw this. I'm going to take a step back. I got an in on one of these scripted shows, like big shows, got to assist for like a year. And like quickly the people they were working with were like, oh, you're an editor. You get it. Like started to get opportunities and then all of them broke into that pretty quickly. But, I've also seen people get mired in the assistant position for years. And one of the drawbacks of that compared to the thing that I did is that you don't get to be in the driver's seat, right? Like I was also getting a lot of training, very Karate Kid style, like a lot of training on storytelling, on, editorial tricks, on like getting better at doing my own sound. And like, you get a lot of notes about like that kind of stuff. And the more notes you get about certain things, once you realize if you're listening closely to what's happening to you, you realize you're getting a lot of the same notes from like studios or producers or whatever. You're like, this is the thing I could get better at. I could get better at this sound effect treatment. I could get better at like cutting these sort of things to tell a story. I could get better at, taking air out between lines, like a lot of these kinds of things. And that's just experience you get only when you're in the driver's seat. It's such a weird singular job to be cutting, right? That as an assistant, you don't really get that training. The sort of on the job, under pressure, under fire training that you need to really get better at it. Like then you're like, oh, now the battle is on and it's, everything's real. Like there's actual deadlines, there's actual pressure, there's actual strangers you don't know watching your cut and giving you criticism of it, and you have to be prepared to not take that personally and just be like, great, how do we make this better? So, I mean, that kind of experience, that practice, it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And I have to say, well done as a sidebar on getting Karate Kid into the conversation.
Oh, thanks.
It sounds like a shameless plug if I try to do it, but you did it so organically. So very, very well done. I appreciate that.
Oh, no. Yeah. I totally forgot about that. It's funny. It's like, if only you had a giant like Cobra Kai poster back there behind you.
Yeah. If only I had a Cobra Kai pillow and a Miyagi-Do pillow.
Oh my God, you do.
On each side of my couch. We're only audio only, but in the video, like on each side of my couch, I have a Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. And I usually have those in my edit bay, and clearly there isn't an edit bay anymore. But the joke I always make is you got to choose a side. Are you Cobra Kai or are you Miyagi-Do? So that was always a fun conversation.
Well, it seems like there's a difference between like, are you 80s Cobra Kai, or are you 2010, right?
Yeah, very, very, very different versions of Cobra Kai. But I want to come back to this idea of assistant editor versus editor. Because when I tell my story, very similar to yours, people say, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, that's so lucky that you didn't have to be an assistant editor. How did you make that happen? And the simple answer is, well, that's the choice that I made. It's not that it just happened. I made a choice really early in my career, especially nowadays, that being an assistant editor is so disconnected from being an editor. It's almost like you're a data management technician as opposed to being an assistant editor. And that's a different soapbox where you and I could probably talk for 3 hours alone just about that. But I said, if I'm going to be an editor at the highest levels, I just want to cut. I don't care if it's for free. I don't care if it's low budget. I don't care if it's international garbage. I don't care. I want to cut, because the more time I spend editing, the better an editor I become, just because it's not in the exact right pipeline and it's not climbing a ladder. It's developing and honing a craft.
Absolutely.
So that was a choice that I made, but it was a sacrifice for almost 10 years of my career, because I was turning down money to work on things to hone my craft. But if you're looking at the curve, it's a hockey stick shaped curve.
It's a hockey stick shaped curve. Oh, you mean like it kind of starts off flat down here on the ice?
Yeah, it's a hockey stick. Yeah. So if you're looking at what most people think progress looks like, it looks like this, right? So
hold on, it's audio.
But it's kind of this linear line that's slowly progressing up,
like a straight.
But I believe that it's oftentimes the hockey stick where it's slow, then bam, you just take off and it shoots straight up. That's what they call the hockey stick shaped curve, right?
It looks like a hockey stick. More like a banana, sort of like
or a banana curve, whatever, right? Boy, this is going to be amazing content once this is audio only. I must say, by the way. I'm
saying that, like, you want to be clear that if the banana is like sitting up, like but a vertical banana, right? Like it's sitting on the ground, and then like you're holding up the top end of it up here, like up straight up off the floor. So like it doesn't matter. You get it.
I knew that you and I were going to have fun recording a podcast. I had no idea we would talk about banana shaped curves, but I knew we were going to have fun, and we barely just gotten started.
But you're right. I mean, it's a long game, right? Like the idea is that, like, you know, careers are different than jobs, right? Like ideally you are, you know, people are looking to make this is your livelihood for your adult life, which potentially is, you know, 40 years of work, you know, give or take. I mean, so, you know, maybe you don't want to do that long. That's fine. But there are definitely people who are into it just to succeed and say they succeeded, you know. Man, it's like musicians, right? Broadly speaking, there's two sort of buckets you can put musicians in. There's the people who want to be rock stars, and then there's the people who want to just make great work, you know, just like write great songs or be great performers. And like, there's a sort of just, you know, people, obviously there's a lot of gray area between them, but you know, the motivations are sort of what matters. And I think people that there are people who are very successful who are not super interested in like high quality music, right? That are just like out there, just like as pop stars, and great, good for them. That's just sort of not my jam. And you can succeed at that a lot quicker, and you could burn out a lot faster, like flame out a lot faster, be like, oh, that was it, flash in the pan and you're done. You know?
Well, and that's a big part of this conversation, I think, is that once you say the B word, once we talk about burnout, oh my God, I could talk forever.
Yeah.
And you've hit the nail on the head, which is, and I love this idea of the two ends of the spectrum, where you have the rock star that just wants to be famous and wants to make all the money. And then the polar opposite is what, let's call them the artist. Right? The artist just wants to do it for the sake of the craft. And I believe that the ones that are really the most successful are the ones that meet in the middle, where they're getting paid really well and they're the rock star, but they're doing it for the process. And I think that in order to avoid that burnout, you have to be connected emotionally and feel fulfilled by the work that you're creating. And I feel so many people only focus on, how do I get the next job? Well, when I go to the next party, I want to be proud of the credit that I'm talking about, or this might win an Emmy versus this might not win an Emmy. How about instead enjoy what you're doing for 60 hours a week first, and then let that guide your choices? I feel so many people don't think about that, and they're just chasing the external and not thinking about the internal.
This is a smart point. You know, when Crazy Ex-Girlfriend came along, obviously it's so easy for all of us, right, to look back. You look backwards and be like, whoa, look at the way these things worked out. And they kind of like all, you know, this makes sense, right? But it's very much harder to look forward and do that. I do think that there's a lot of people who make choices like you were saying, like, how does this get me to where I'm going? But, you know, I was at this point where I had been working on a few scripted series at the time. And I was sort of not happy just with what the day-to-day of what I was doing. And I got sent by my Bloodline agent the script for the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend pilot. And I loved it. You know, again, I was a theater kid back in the day, and a musical comedy pilot. What? That sounds great. Also, I needed to like branch out and like meet more people. I didn't know enough people still on the scripted side. And I left working on New Girl, which, you know, was a big hit, right? It wasn't going where I wanted it to go.
And you were only cutting New Girl, correct? There was no transition to director, at least in American scripted television at this point.
Exactly. The door was not opening. You know, I was knocking on the door and I was poking my face through the door and asking if I could come in. You know, and I kept getting a lot of very polite, you know, we'll talk about it, we'll see, you know, maybe later, et cetera, from everybody. And I think that was hard for me because I would get footage constantly on all different shows that was not good, and have to find a way to, make a really quality episode or product out of it. And this, editing is such a great, it's such a great extension of being in film school while also getting paid, because you're getting to study up close, like directors' footage. Like I work for so many great directors, and I work for a lot of terrible directors who, with the terrible ones, you're like, oh my God, this is garbage. How do we find a way to make this into something? These shots are missing. The stuff doesn't match. The things doesn't make sense. The story's not told. And then, elevating that. But also with great director's footage, getting it and being like, okay, how do I make sure that I don't fuck this up? Obviously, these dailies are great and they're really full of life, and you want to make sure the cut doesn't break any of that, right? But it's still like, maintain some fidelity to the material and to the emotion and to the tone, and like it's still telling a story visually that's cool and impactful. So I had a lot of experience, doing that, either cleaning up or just polishing and improving. But, I left to go do this Crazy Ex-Girlfriend pilot. I was like, it was a big pilot for Showtime, and Showtime, we were very proud of what we turned in, and they did not like it. They passed, which was upsetting, But, 6 months later, along comes another network. They decide they want to pick it up. We adjust the cut back to the version that we had liked before we had done all these network notes. That we went back to our first cut, and man, it's bananas that I constantly am like, I cannot believe it. Like every day, I can't believe it. But like, I left that job to go do this pilot just because I really loved the people. They were so kind and generous and creative and fun. And, to win an Emmy for editing that episode, like you can't plan that, right? Like you can't be like, I'm going to go do this thing and I'm pretty sure this is where it's going. I just did it because I thought I would enjoy it. And then I obviously began directing on that show, and then began directing and producing on that show. And that's where I am now.
There's a little tiny bit in that one sentence that I might want to break down before we move forward. This is the crux of the whole conversation. Yeah. So I took on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and I won an Emmy, and then I'm directing, now I'm producing. So here we are. There's a lot happening in there. I'm going to assume that after you did the pilot for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, that it didn't just magically, luckily land in your lap that you transitioned to directing. How is it that you made that happen?
I moved here into LA in 1998, and sometime within a few weeks of editing that first job, I started being like, hey, so like, it was like a little music video clip show, and I was asking about like being on set and shooting it. And like, like I said, there years worth, but especially in that first year, I was definitely making a lot of noise about like, this footage that we've got, it doesn't really kind of work together the way you kind of hope it would. But what would fix that is if you had me do it. This was sort of my pitch, and generally it did not work. But, every now and then it did work, and I got to go and shoot like a little piece of something. And you just like anything else, it's easy to talk about like when you're working in post, it's easy to talk about the mistakes that were made on the set and the failure of the footage without a deeper understanding of how and why things went wrong and what you maybe could have done to make it better. And that just comes with practice, and I just started taking every opportunity I could to like go be on set and like run a, little DV camera for like, a couple hours and shoot some B-roll of this cemetery for this, whatever it was, and years and years of just gently saying to people like, yeah, but you should have me shoot it, and then this wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't have all these problems we're having in post right now. And over the years, more and more people started to say yes. But also as a result of that, I was slowly building up a slightly longer and longer list of stuff that I had shot. And a lot of it was very small, and like, a lot of it was like basic cable and stuff that hadn't aired. And like, it was just little bits, but it started to add up, in a banana shaped curve or a hockey stick shaped curve, which is still not something I'm really clear on. Maybe you can put a drawing on the website of like what this is. But by the time I had I remember doing the pilot of Crazy Ex, they knew that I had directed this half hour we talked about a few years prior, and that I directed like part of the Oscars and part of the Emmys that both come off directly off of, editing those jobs and getting an opportunity to shoot some. So they knew, and they were like, if we get a second season, first season shows are hard to get slots on if you're as a first time director, just because from a studio perspective, there's so much at stake, and, you're as an unproven director, a risky proposition for them. And one of the big things that is in play for these kinds of jobs is there obviously, of course, these people are looking to minimize risk, right? So you, Zach, are a director who's done like 100 episodes, like they're not worried about hiring you, right? And they're not worried that it'll blow back on them if they approve you, that their boss will be like, why'd you hire Zach? And you're like, well, he's done 100 episodes. But if you try to hire me and I've done 0, then they're going to be like, why did you approve this guy and it failed? Right? That's the sort of
CYA, cover your ass.
Absolutely. And so by the time, we finished our first season, they knew, and then they offered me an episode, season 2.
So we're going to pause for a second. I'm going to share my screen.
Holy crap.
I'm going to include this image in the show notes, but live on this call, this would be the 4 stages of hockey stick growth. Visually, you can see this is very similar to what you're talking about. Years and years of tinkering, just trying the thing, shooting in the backyard, shooting in the graveyard, going over the pond, shooting some international stuff, learning. And then all of a sudden you hit the inflection point.
Yeah.
The inflection point was, wait a second, somebody's actually asking me to do this. And it goes back to our initial conversation, setting yourself up for success. But you didn't say, oh, you know what? I haven't done enough TV to be perfect. You thought to yourself, I know enough to survive day 1. I know enough to get on set and be good enough and learn the rest. Because like you said, I'm a little bit cocky. I'm pretty sure I can do this, even though maybe I don't know, maybe I can't. But we're going to find out. But you had the confidence that you could figure the rest of it out. And that's where you hit the inflection point. And now you're just off to the races. But it started with that one transition from, I've been doing this stuff for years, here and there. The most important piece of it being, and I think this is what everybody misses. My sincerest apologies for the interruption in the middle of this interview. But if you are a content creator or you work in the entertainment industry, not only is the following promo not an interruption, but listening has the potential to change your life. Because collaborating with Evercast is that powerful. Here's a brief excerpt from a recent interview that I did with Evercast co-founders Brad Thomas and award-winning editor Roger Barton.
Living this lifestyle of a feature film editor has really had an impact on me. So I was really looking for something to push back against all of these lifestyle infringements that are imposed on us, both by schedules and expectations. When you guys demoed Evercast for me that first time, my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, oh my God, this is what I have been waiting for a decade.
I also had the same reaction when I first saw Evercast. 2 words came to mind: game changer.
Our goal, honestly, is to become the Zoom for creatives, whatever it is you're streaming, whether it's editorial, visual effects, Pro Tools for music composition, live shot cameras. It's consistent audio and video, lip sync always stays in sync. Whether you're in a live session where you're getting that feedback immediately, or you can't get it immediately, so you record the session and you can share those clips with people on the production team where there's no room for any confusion. It's like, this is exactly what the director wants. This is exactly what the producer wants.
What matters most to me is it makes the entire process more efficient, which then translates to us as creatives who spend way too much time in front of computers. We get to shut it down and we get to go spend time with our friends and family.
The biggest complaint, and I'm sure you guys have heard this many, many times, this looks amazing, I just can't afford it.
Tesla had to release the Model S before they released the Model 3. So by the end of the year, we are going to be releasing a sub $200 version a month of Evercast for the freelancer and indie creatives. Anyone who is a professional video creator outside of Hollywood.
I think what we've learned over the last few months is that this technology can translate to better lives for all of us, that give us more flexibility and control while still maintaining the creativity, the creative momentum, and the quality of work.
I cannot stress this enough. Evercast is changing the way that we collaborate. If you value your craft, your well-being, and spending quality time with the ones you love, Evercast now makes that possible for you and me. To listen to the full interview and learn about the amazing potential that Evercast has to change the way that you work and live, visit optimizeyourself.me/Evercast. Now back to today's interview. They have to make their intentions known. Yeah. So many people are waiting for the opportunity. Like, why aren't they asking me if I want to direct? You have to be clear and make your intentions known.
Squeaky wheel, right? You got it. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. And you don't want to squeak too much because then they'll get a new wheel. But you got to you absolutely have to. And look, I've been making it clear to everybody that I possibly could since I was 23, that was the plan, right? Directing, scripted, brand name content. And I got literally laughed at a lot. I will never forget. Funny story. I will never forget. I had directed a reality pilot, I don't know, more than a decade ago. And it was not very good. And I remember I went to get, because so much of the work especially for post, it's hard, but I feel like post-production people need to be aware of like, it's really important to stay networking constantly, like however much you're doing is probably not enough. Like, this just means like going and getting a sandwich with, some producer in the middle of the afternoon, or going and getting a drink with people after work. Like, it's really important. It's generating genuine relationships and connections with people is way better than just having met them once and hoping they'll remember you 2 years later when you're looking for a job, right? Like, so many of our jobs come on whims. Someone's just like, oh, right. I do know an editor who's available. I just spoke to them a few weeks ago, whatever that is. But I had gone to get a sandwich at Panera in Glendale with this producer of this reality pilot after we finished it, to talk about kind of what was next. He was doing this scripted show, and I was like, I want to talk to him about it. And I'll never forget that the person who ran that production company happened to walk into that Panera also. And I was really excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get to talk to this guy. And the producer I was sitting with, he introduced me. We were like, what are you guys talking about? And he was like, oh, we're just talking about career stuff. He's like, Kabir thinks he's going to be directing scripted shows. And laughed. And I was like, yo, what? Like, what a dick. And it's funny because it's embarrassing, right? Like, it's embarrassing. I was like, oh yeah, I guess they're like, oh, well, what kind of stuff have you done? I was like, well, I just did this pilot for this reality show that's not getting picked up. It's not going to air. No one's ever going to see it, but I worked hard on it for a few days while we were shooting it. And like, it's a lousy feeling, right? But it just strengthened my resolve, and I am doing it now, which is really exciting. Sidebar, that producer is not doing it now.
I love the little twisting of the knife. That's great. You strike me as the type that when you hear the word can't, that just motivates you more.
Yeah, I just feel like, there's no reason. It's funny because like it happens sometimes that you'd be working late at night in post, and like, I remember having a day working on a show where I realized that the people I was working with at like the middle of the night it occurred to me, I was like, oh, I'm working for my extra like hourly overtime, like golden hours, right? Or whatever, plus my like night premium, I was like, but these people are working for an unbelievable amount of money, but we're all spending the same hours here together. I'm just being compensated extremely, very differently than they are. And it sort of didn't sit right with me because I was like, I say this all the time, but like, editors are creative leaders on shows. Like, I think at some point long ago, it was like a bit of a technical process. Like you were talking about, like not being an avid tech and all this, but like, it's, at least a third of the process. Like, there's like writing and pre-production, and there's actually shooting it, and then there's post, and post is its whole own phase of the project where things change dramatically, where the TV show or the film comes together. I mean, that's like the essence of filmmaking. It's a unique thing that doesn't exist outside of filmmaking. Like, this is why it's hard to explain to like your parents what it is that editors do, because everybody can understand what actors do, what the costumes does, what props does, what the composer does. Like, those things are real world things that exist elsewhere, right? Set building and all this. People know what all those things are, The post only exists here. Editing only exists like this. It's an art form that is invisible, right? And that nobody understands. But I'm biased, even as a director full time now. I'm like, post is the most important part of the process. And so it's, I think that I do think that there's a problem in the industry where post is not respected enough for what we do, and also not remotely understood well enough. And I think that most people in post probably feel that way. And it's too bad. Because, as my career has changed to, directing and producing now, I've really learned so much more that it's like, stupidly, I didn't know so much, when I was still cutting. Like, I sort of have a sense of what life was like, above the line. But man, it is really different. And I, continue to advocate for post to like get more opportunities like this, because, this is where the grand game is being played.
Well, what I've always talked about for years and years and years is you look at the process, like you said, you do the math just as far as number of days involved with the project, outside of the showrunner, the show creator, the main writer, like head writer, showrunner, or a director if you're in features. Nobody spends more time from the beginning until the end except the editor.
Absolutely.
Or the editors if you're in television.
Absolutely.
Except we're treated like technicians.
Yes.
right? So that there's just the mere fact that you see a composer above the line and an editor below the line has never made any sense to me. And I'm not saying I want to bring the composers down with us. I'm saying we should be up in the same above the line conversation because we're bringing just as much or even more to it. A writer's above the line. I write with Avid, they write with Final Draft. What's the difference? I'm doing the same thing, but it's so easy to relegate us as technicians because we're just cutting out the bad parts and we're just putting all the clips together and we've already written it for you. It's all the lines are even in order. How hard could it be?
How hard could it be? Yeah, well, as editors, I say a lot, we're professional rearrangers. And how often are you looking at a cut and you have a moment of inspiration where you're like, actually, this end part of this thing should be before this beginning part of the thing. These parts are redundant. They're duplicative. They don't need to both be here. They don't advance the story in any meaningful way. Yeah. But to what you're saying, like nobody wants to edit. People obviously want to, and I love doing it. I haven't got the chance to do it in a while, but like everybody industry-wide, like people want to like write and direct and act. And those are things that, everybody's aiming for. Nobody wants to be an editor, because like nobody understands what it is. And it seems weird and foreign and strange. It's not a thing that's easily explainable to other people. We're the dark arts of production, right? Like it's a strange thing that people sort of have a sense of, but like it's difficult to wrap people's head around. But ultimately, part of the success I'm finding directing now is that like as a director, understanding with a real detailed understanding of post-production, we can save so much money and so much time on set, like not shooting things that won't cut together, or not shooting things that don't need to be shot with too many takes, because there are ways like we can quickly, one animat will solve this. Let's make the choice now to shoot this thing locked off so that we can split screen this. We can just fix in the online. It's not even a visual effect. Things like that, I'm like, hey, if we're gonna pick this scene up again from the middle, just make sure this one actor is turning back around so that we have an actual cut point to come from the shot that I expect is going to go before it in the sequence. I'm constantly when I'm on set, I'm constantly picturing what the script window looks like for this scene. I'm like looking at it, I'm like, well, okay, yeah, there's enough of these. There's enough of A here. We'll need B from over. Like just, I have no concept of how people direct without detailed understanding of post. It doesn't make sense to me. Like I know people do it, obviously, and successfully. It just doesn't I don't understand how.
So what I'm curious about is you have alluded to this idea that there are so many things you didn't understand about the way the business really works. And for us mere editors, the peasants of the industry that haven't seen the other side, we don't know how good the above the line people have it without, breaking all of the rules and telling all the secrets that you've been secretly told in these rooms. Like, don't tell the editors that the directors and the producers get this.
Right.
But I would love to know, what are some of the things that you've realized that would be important for people that are below the line that are wondering, why is it that we're treated this way? Or why is this structured this way? What are some of the things that you've learned that you think would be beneficial for the craftspeople to know?
That's a great question. I think that there's a lot to talk about. Post is really treated, like you were kind of alluding to, oftentimes like peasants, when they, editors are like, dukes and should have a seat at the table, and ideally when you're on a show, a lot of shows don't do this. And I don't think they're doing it maliciously at all. They're just not thinking about it, and as the editor, you have the opportunity to involve yourself in the process. People would like, I think, editors to be at like tone meetings and at production meetings and involved in the process so you could raise your hand and say something. But by the same token, a lot of times people do not want additional voices in the room, They're not looking for someone to show up and be like, excuse me, it would work better if you did it like this, because that's just, a lot of people aren't open to that. But, if you find the best case scenario for all of us is to work with people that we enjoy collaborating with, right? It's like being in a band or just like playing music in someone's house, like in their garage or whatever. Like you just want people that you can jam with and you kind of jam well with. You kind of bounce ideas off each other. Everyone's respectful. Everyone's like listening. And I found, the environment at Crazy Ex-Girlfriend was so great for me because everyone was so open and so collaborative. And like I said before, very just generous of spirit. And like, it was like the best job I've ever had. And to be there for 4 years was like a dream come true. But like a lot of times people want the editors excluded from things, which is no good. And I feel like, for those of you who find yourself in an environment like that, you should leave. I don't think it's necessary to work like that. I certainly always was like, when I would find myself working in situations where people that were not respecting what it was that I was did or the massive contribution we made, I would leave because, you got to live your life. You got to go home and see your families and your friends. And it's not healthy. You talk about this all the time, man. Like, it's not healthy to just be at work, all the time. I mean, sure, sometimes you get long days and there's nothing you can do about it. The schedule backs up. But as an occasional thing, sure, it's like housing a whole bag of potato chips. Like, do that as an occasional thing, right? Don't do it all the time. I think that the more and more I started to slowly learn about the way that, deals are structured, because it's not a thing that a lot of us deal with, the post end, for 14 years, I made my own deal on every show, that I worked on. 14 years? 16 years. For 16 years, I made my own deal on every show I went on to. And back in the day, that meant trying to negotiate an extra, $50 a day, right? They offer, way back in the day, it would be it's gonna be is it 700? Is it 750? What are we talking about? And we're just trying to be pushing for as much as we can. And sometimes we can't go above 34.50 a week. And you're like, okay, right?
But we have our precedents. Don't you understand? We have precedents,
yeah,
right?
Which is yeah, I guess. But, I don't know if this is the right attitude to have had. It worked for me. I don't know if it will work for everybody. And I don't know if it backfired ever on me. But I used to be well, then I'm not doing it. I, since the beginning especially the beginning as a freelancer, from, age 23, was constantly, and still am, constantly concerned that I might suddenly be out of work permanently. Our careers are so weird. It could all just blow away, tomorrow. And okay, how much have I saved up? So I became very meticulous very early on about saving as much money as I could. Because, you don't know when the next job's coming, right? All of us, it's okay, I have this gig and okay, it's this many months and then how long will I be off for then? You don't want to be panicked and stressed because you got to pay the rent, you got to pay bills, you got to get food, you got to pay your health premium, whatever that is. I found that I was constantly just trying to be smart with money. And as a freelancer, I think it's really important. It's I'm not sure there's anything more important than that because that's ultimately the bottom, literally. But also, if you operate that way, you start to be able to create opportunities for yourself to say no, which is the most powerful thing you can do as a creative worker. To be I'm getting paid for my creative talents. You're getting paid because people like to have you around. People want to give people opportunities. I mean, good people do. You don't want to work for people that don't want to give people opportunities. You want to work with supportive and creative, cool people, ideally. And yeah, I even back in the day, so there'd be a job would be well, we can't pay more than 32 a week. I'm well, okay, fine. I'm not doing it. I'm looking for 34 or whatever. It was it's not a huge difference, right? It's
it's about respect. That's the thing for me, is that it shows a certain level of respect that, and it took me a long time to learn this because I've always been of the craftsman blue collar mentality that I'm somebody that gets paid for the hours that I work. That's the way that I was brought up, right? You're a hard worker. You do what you're told. I was born in a farming community of 400 people where you were lucky to have a job where you got paid 15 or 20 bucks an hour. So you get paid for hours, right? And the fundamental mindset shift that I made, thanks to my business mentor, was that we don't get paid for the hours that we work. We get paid for the value that we bring to the project and to the team.
Absolutely.
And I believe that even though I might be working the same 45 to 60 hours a week as another person on the other side of the wall doing the same job and the same software, there's a different level of value that I know I am able to bring. And I confidently want to convey that in negotiations. And if they don't want me to bring that value, that's fine. Find somebody else that'll sit in the same chair for less money. But I've seen it happen over and over, and I'm sure you have too, where they make that choice. Then you get the phone call 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, we need your help. Oh, but that guy knew Avid.
Yes.
He knew how to edit, right? So what do you need me for? It's a totally different level.
Yeah, I think you have to start to sense when you're in demand. And, also you're getting paid as a freelancer for the time that you're not working too. A weekly rate, $3,000 a week sounds, multiplies out fantastically when you're working, if you worked all 50 weeks, but you don't work all 52 weeks, you can't make jobs line up like that. And a lot of times, the hours are not great and you don't want to be going full speed all the time, and that all just factors into how much how much you're worth, and what you can negotiate over scale. And, studios, especially on bigger shows, they want to be like, here's the rate and that's it. Take it or leave it. You have to be willing to be in a position to be like, well, leave it. Like, you have to be able to say, like, I think that it's hard. It's not easy, man. I'm not saying this is an easy thing to do. This comes with like decades of experience for myself, but like, you have to be able to say no. Like, I'm not going to do this. It's not worth it to me. I don't want to, because you don't want to be in a situation where then you get there and it's day one and now you start working and you're working hard and it's crazy and it's not a show you like and you get the drive across town is no fun and like the people aren't great. And you're like, why am I doing this? Well, I should have asked for more money, and don't want to be kicking yourself because you could have asked for more money. Truly, the worst case is they'll say no, and then you could still do it. You can ask for more. They'll say no, and you go, okay, great, I'll do it anyway. You have to know what you're willing to settle for. But I mean, that's just part of the business end, and I think as creatives, it can be tricky to be willing to stand up for yourself.
Well, like you said, one of the key points to being able to say no is that I have to financially plan and put myself in a position where I'm not afraid to say no. Because if I've got 2 weeks worth left in my account, I've got no choice. I have to say yes. But one of the key ingredients to burnout is resentment. If you resent the chair that you're in and the way that you're being treated, I don't care how amazing the show is that you're working on, the credits. I don't even care if you win an Emmy. If you resent the fact that you're there and the way people are treating you, it will eat you alive.
Absolutely. It's stressful to be in a situation where you're never home for dinner, right? Like, it can be fun and games to be like, oh, we're getting dinner ordered here at work. If you're going home at like 7 something afterwards, right? But if you're working till like 9, 12, 2 a.m., well, now it's not. Now this is just taking over everything you're doing, and that's not healthy, And that, again, in service of trying to have a long career, that's not a good idea. Plus, like, just to zoom out for a second, like, why did we all get into this? Like, we got into this ideally, like, because it was like there were hopefully cool big opportunities on some future horizon. Like doing some giant movies or working on some cool like music videos or like doing this like sick trailer, like whatever it was, like something that inspired you, and it's. At some point along the way, for I think a lot of people, it can quickly become like, okay, well, I got to make sure I'm laying enough track in front of me that I can just survive to the next job, which is unfortunate because, obviously everyone has their own different financial circumstances, and it can be hard. You can get painted into a corner where now you have to say yes to this job that you don't want to do. And look, I've been there, man. I worked for some garbage rates on some truly garbage programming that was, was non-union and in windowless offices with people that were mean and did not want to hear me speak during the day. And, I cutting a sizzle reel, 10 years ago for some reality company where I had a suggestion about like the structure of it and like what, maybe part of the way the show could be pitched. I'll never forget the head of this company being like, why don't you leave the pitching to me and just do the editing? And I also will never forget that I quit that day. And I was like, then I'm not doing it. Like, I do not believe that it's okay to be treated like that. And I was like, it's also like, it's this reality sizzle reel. This is not like a career make or break. You can't be scared of stuff like that. And I understand the feeling it, but like, I was like, nope, no. That was it. I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm not like, I didn't move across the country or go to film school or like be a fan of movies. I did not do that to do this.
Or to be treated like that, right?
Yes, exactly what I mean. Like to be in a workspace like that. It was like, no, absolutely not. Like, this is just not acceptable to me. And I feel like that has served me well, being able to be like, nope, this is not. Especially, and a big part of this, I think, I was inspired by looking around at, find people whose careers you admire and think they're doing cool stuff and find out what they did and sort of what their track was. And I don't know, I think it's easy for people. I have friends now who are like, well, it's amazing you're directing and producing like, these like Netflix shows and whatever else. I'm like, yeah. 8 years ago, I was in a windowless room editing Act 6 of a show on a cable network that nobody owns, you know what I mean? Or nobody has. And like, man, I mean, that's, just have to be like, no, I don't want to do this. Like he was doing for a paycheck and okay, great. It was like, they're like, well, it pays, a few $100s less than normal. And I'm like, okay, I just needed a paycheck, it just needed to work. But I think the more room you leave yourself, the more flexibility you have to make choices, right? And start being able to make choices as a creative, professional, that's everything.
Absolutely. Well, the last topic that I want to hit on, which I alluded to briefly before we even started this, and one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show specifically, using your words, not mine, you've alluded to yourself more than once as the quote unquote, the brown editor or the brown director. And I think it's really important for an Indian kid that's being told he needs to be a director, or he needs to be a doctor, or he needs to be a lawyer, or an accountant, or whatever color they might be. It's so easy right now to think, oh, well, I don't know of any Indian TV directors, so it's just not possible, right? So when I did an interview with Monty DeGraff talking about mentorship a few months ago, and I saw a comment, and the comment, I couldn't even comprehend it. It just that this was somebody's worldview really shocked me. It looked like it was a young Indian girl, I would guess maybe right out of college at best, maybe still in college. And seeing Monty at the highest levels as an editor, as a Black man, she said, I didn't realize that people like that could work at that level.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I couldn't even comprehend that somebody would think it's literally not possible, which is the whole reason that I want to have people like Monty and you on the show, so people can say it is possible. But talk to me, because I'm assuming that you didn't just skirt through from getting out of college to where you are now without at least a challenge or two along the way.
Well, I think that probably a lot of those challenges were things that I didn't necessarily recognize were happening for that reason,
which makes them even more important to talk about.
Yeah. And years later, you don't know, there's studies done about resumes being sent in, identical resumes being sent in for people, whose names might be like Zach Arnold versus Deshaun Johnson, and who's getting calls, my name is only 11 letters long and it's hard enough for people to pronounce. I don't know, that could have certainly played a factor. I'm not sure, but I do know that it's hard to fight against something that you don't necessarily know is there or is happening, and you're not sure that's the reason why it's happening. It's easier now for sure than it was, 5 years ago. Things changed so quickly that people, all the studios started to really, really be aware of it. All the guilds are starting to be really, really aware of this as a problem, and realizing that the biggest issue is not so much in the hiring, but is in the pipeline of people getting opportunities to get into the game, to, even know the people, it's just the bottom line truth is with those of us in hiring positions, we hire people who are either qualified or that we know and that are slightly less qualified, but they're I believe this person can do it, and that, man, that's important. It makes it's hard to it's hard if you don't know people that are from different diverse backgrounds than you are. Right. And where do you know those people? It's funny, man, I've been in, ACE for, like I said, 6 years, and recently learned that there's a diversity committee. And I was like, we have a diversity committee? I was like, there are, why don't I know? What do I know about this? If I don't know about it, who else doesn't know about it? And so I think it becomes about getting the word out to whoever you can. And, the ACE internships and stuff like that, I've met, editors who are up and coming through that. People have showed up at work and been I'm like, yeah, great. I didn't know you existed. I run into this, man. Even as a director, I run into this where, I've been a co-chair of the Asian American Committee of the Directors Guild. And I have learned that currently, right now, there are, if you count up all the South Asian, directors in the Guild who have done more than 2 episodes of TV, there are, in the last few years, there are 16 in the whole industry, which is stunning. But what's even more stunning is sometimes I will meet an exec and they're like, oh my God, we didn't even know about you, And I'm like, fuck, I'm out there hustling constantly. And I'm like, wow, how do you not know about me? I was like, how do I not know about you? It's just so much about this is about educating people about who's available and who's out there. And that just comes through relationships. It's easier now as a director. Having an agent, manager, et cetera, who are representing on my behalf. I had a fantastic agent when I was editing, and she made such a gigantic difference, It's because of her that I ended up on Crazy X. It's because of her that I ended up on all those different good positions, all the help you can get.
So I'm curious. I know that we need to wrap it up, and I want to be respectful of your time. But there's one final question that I'd asked a previous guest, very similar to your situation. Have you ever run into Andy Armaganian?
Absolutely. She was in film school a few years ahead of me.
Small world.
Yeah.
So there we go. So I recently did a conversation with her, and we had a similar talk. And she had brought up this idea of being the token female hire. I'm curious.
I've never been the token female hire.
And of course, you've never been the token female hire, but do you ever feel like that there's this fear that I'm the token brown hire?
No, I feel like if I'm the token brown hire, that is awesome. I truly, I think I have a really different perspective on this than a lot of people do. And it's probably the least woke perspective I can have, but I don't care. I'm like, I just want the job, right? Like, I just want the job. I have just generally never cared about that. But the other thing I say, like I said about that other job before, where I was like their 9th or 10th or 11th choice, I was like, I also don't care about that. I've kind of had an attitude my whole career that's like, who cares? Like, just put me in the game and like, let's see what I can do. Like I'll tell you, this is stupid, but like in college, right? I was the lighting designer on this one musical. And there's a lot of different like theater groups, right, at school. And I had like, gone to the meeting to like be like, I want to lighting design the show. And then like I got it and I was excited and did like a job that was actually really, really cool. I was very proud of. And like all of the other theater groups, a whole bunch of them came out of the woodwork and were asking me to do their next show after that. And I remember at the wrap party, cast party, whatever, like, that night, next night, whatever. I remember the director of the show, who's my age, right? He was like, oh my God, he's like, dude, and we were just drinking, but he was like, he's like, can you imagine? He's like, that other guy wasn't available. How lucky that was that we got you. And I was like, wait, what? He's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, wait, what are you saying? And he's like, well, yeah, we wanted this other guy, but he took another show. And I was like, dude, I do not care. Like, 19-year-old me, I was like, I don't care if I'm your like 3rd or 10th choice. I was like, I got to do it and look what I did. And you were happy and I was happy and that's it, like.
I think one of the reasons that you may look at it that way, which goes back to the piece of advice that she had given that was really profound. I never heard anybody put it this way before, but she said, I don't care if I'm the female token hire. The reason being that I might be that token hire the first time, but nobody hires you again because you're the token female or the token brown guy or anything else.
Oh, interesting.
You might get the first hire, but you're not going to get asked back. And I think you have such confidence in your ability to deliver. Just get me in the door. Like you said, I just put me in the game, coach. I know I can play. I just want the one opportunity. I don't care how it happens. If I have to be the water boy and everybody on the field gets injured and I put on somebody else's pads, I now have the opportunity to show you what I can do. But that requires an immense amount of preparation, which brings us back full circle to where we started, just doing that one thing after another and just building the skills and the confidence that you can show up day one and do the job.
See, well, look, I am, from Philadelphia. I'm a diehard Eagles fan. I am absolutely not a Tom Brady fan, but Tom Brady was a 6th round draft pick, backup, and he got on the field only because the guy in front of him, Drew Bledsoe, got injured. So suddenly they had to turn to their backup, who was like, literally draft pick number 199. Like all the other teams took off 200 people before someone picked him. And then look what happened. Now he's Tom Brady. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. I think you can't be precious about stuff like that. All you can control, the thing you can control the most is your skill level. And just to keep trying to get better. You just want to keep getting better. I mean, like by the time I did my last editing job, I've been doing it, for 20 years. And I love it. And every scene that comes along, it's like its own challenge, It's like, sometimes there's kind of like a simple 2-person scene, but they're all different, right? But it's like, you don't just want to keep doing the same thing over and over. And even now as a director, at this point I've directed, 25 episodes of TV in the last couple of years. I'm like, every scenes with 2 people, they're all different. You're still looking for different shades and different like ways to tell the story and like have it not just be, kind of the same thing, right? Like, I think skill level is it's not talked about enough. Like,
I feel like the hard skills are talked about, the Avid skills and the certifications and here's how to use Premiere. Like, I feel like that stuff is talked about a lot. I feel like the real soft skills, whether, like you said, it's the relationship building, it's how to manage a room, how to negotiate. Those are the things that I think are so undervalued on the craft side of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, developing relationships, like working with, you got to realize, like when you're working with a director in the room, with a producer in the room, like, you're still kind of in charge of the session and like you're still kind of in charge of the cut, and you have to be able to effectively, gently manage these people who are up the chain from you, right? And find a way into their creative confidence. Like, feel like you're having a conversation that's back and forth, and like, it's like, look, I played the bass. I played bass for a long time. Like, it's like that. Sometimes you have these guitar players who are like, I'm the lead guitar player. Check out this sick solo. And I'm like, yeah, dope. I'm still over here controlling, melody and rhythm and tempo. So go have fun with what you're doing. But like, it's still based on a grounded space that we're providing. I don't know. I feel like over the years, also kind of a chatty person, like, someone will pitch a note in the room and I'll start working on it, but I will be talking to them while I'm doing it because, it sucks that there's just someone sitting there watching your work. Like, well, and he's like, let's just talk about the thing. What are you doing this weekend? Let's get talking about some other stuff. They just be on their phone, like keep it chill, keep it relaxed, keep people feeling like comfortable. And like, you're just kind of like sitting over here working on what you're working on, I don't think enough people are putting on as much of a magic show because it is a magic show. That's what we're doing. It's like post is ideally editors are magicians and it should be a fun space for people, but all that comes with, experience and skill. And it's certainly not that way at the outset.
Well, you've shared at least 173 different knowledge bombs over the course of this interview, but I know that people reach out to you all the time, whether it's at panels, asking you questions, sending you emails. If there were just kind of one simple piece of advice that you think sums up a lot of the questions that you're asked, either to get somebody started, to help them make a transition, like what nugget would you like to leave them with?
Ooh, nuggets. That's a tough one. There's so many. I do think that thinking about editing as a career, I think it would be really important for people to, when they see where they want to get to, when they see other people doing jobs that you want, to really stop and ask yourself, why not? Like, why it can't be you? I think a lot of people look at it and go, well, that's too far away. It's not possible. I'm like, yeah, okay. You're not going to go from, step 1 to step 100 all at once. Right. But like, you're planning on having this career for another 10, 20, 30 plus years. Like, okay, you don't have to get there now. It's not a failure. I mean, I'm really excited. I won an Emmy. I won an Emmy after working in the industry for 18 years, right? I was 41 when it happened. Like, okay, so it doesn't happen when you're like 25, you're not like making all these cool lists. And it's like, who the fuck cares? Like, do cool shit. It takes time. There you go. That's what I'll tell people. It takes time, My last assistant editor, she just got a Universal feature and she's like 31 or something. And I'm like, well, that's bananas. Like that did not happen to me, but like, great. She's absolutely out there slaying the game. But like, okay, great. Like that's amazing. But like, so what? You cut your first movie in your 40s or in your 50s. Like it doesn't matter, I just think like keep your eyes on the prize and keep asking yourself why it can't be you doing the thing you want to do. Look at the people who've done those things. Like I've been fortunate enough to like meet people who've like cut things like Game of Thrones and Star Wars, and all of them are like really excited about what they did. Some of them started off doing that.
And I bet every single one of them at some point thought, I could never do that. I could never work on Star Wars or Game of Thrones, but through a certain, amount of events and some luck and hard work and creating those opportunities, those things end up coming together. But I think the most important thing that people just don't think is a skill that must be acquired and honed, no different than everything we've talked about, is mindset. Having the right mindset.
Yeah.
And if your mindset is, well, I could never do that, well, then you're never going to. But I love the way that you're closing this off. Why not? Why can't I do that? There's really no reason, as long as I'm willing to put in the work and understand that it takes time.
Because other people are. And this was that thing, like, you start to realize that, like, and again, now having like made a transition to being above the line, I'm realizing more and more stuff that I am ashamed to feel stupid that I didn't fully detailed realize. I just didn't realize, like, how much the people above the line are getting paid. And how much sort of like how well they're being treated. And like, I feel like post should be treated that way. But in the current, environment where they're not, like, why not? Like, why not be reaching for more? Why not be wanting to be more part of the process? Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to see, people who went ahead of me career-wise before I did, like, who were editors who then became like, started getting producer credits on their shows. And sometimes it came with a little extra money and sometimes it didn't. But like, it just starts to be about putting more respect on the name of the editor, which I completely believe there should be.
Well, clearly I agree with you. And if anybody wants to revert to my back catalog of episodes where I talk about this topic, refer to episodes 1 through 274, because I talk about this on every stinking show. It's all about more respect for the creatives, but also treating ourselves with that same amount of respect. Again, I left that soapbox in another room. Don't have time to drag it in here. But dear Lord, this was so worth the wait. I know I've been trying to make this work forever. I'm so happy I got this conversation on the record. I think that you shared some tremendous knowledge that people are going to be inspired. And I think that we can change some people's career trajectories because of our conversation today. So I can't thank you enough for being here. If people wanted to connect with you, how can they find you?
Where am I? I'm on Twitter is the best place to find me. I feel like, Twitter, Instagram, more Twitter, really,
So social media, that's the place to find you, is either Twitter or Instagram. What are your handles?
It's the same. It's just my name, Kabir Ahktar. If you can spell it, then you can find me.
All right. So that's how they earn their way in the door. If you can spell it via a search and you find my account, bam, reach out.
Yeah, Google will definitely be like, did you mean to spell it this way? And I'm like, yes, it probably did.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I know how valuable your time is, and I appreciate you giving a small amount of it to me and my audience. So thank you so much, Kabir.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
My sincerest apologies for this brief interruption, but if you are a creative professional who spends long hours at your desk and you are searching for a simple and affordable solution to optimize both your energy and your focus, not only is the following promo not an interruption, but listening has the potential to change your life. Here is a brief excerpt from a recent interview that I did with Ergo-Driven co-founder and CEO Kit Perkins, the creator of the Topomat, who's here today to talk about his newest product, New Standard Whole Protein.
I'm into health and fitness generally, but I want it to be simple and straightforward. About a year and a half ago, I started adding collagen into my protein shakes. And man, the benefits were like more dramatic than any supplement I've ever seen. So I thought, if I could just get this down to coming out of one jar and it's ingredients that I know I can trust, and you just put it in water and you don't have to think about it.
When people think of protein powders, they think, well, I don't want to get big and bulky. And that's not what this is about. To me, this is about repair.
So a big part of what we're talking about here is you are what you eat. Your body's constantly repairing and rebuilding, and the only stuff it can use to repair and rebuild is what you've been eating. Unfortunately, as the years have gone by, every day getting out of bed, it's like, 2 or 3 creaks and pops in the first couple steps. And that I thought you just sort of lived with now. But yeah, once starting the collagen daily or near daily, it's just gone. So for us, job 1A here was make sure it's high quality, and that's grass-fed, 100% pasture-raised cows. And then the second thing, if you're actually going to do it every day, it needs to be simple. It needs to taste good.
Well, my goal is that for anybody that is a creative professional like myself that's stuck in front of a computer, number one, they're doing it standing on a Topomat. Number two, they've got a glass of New Standard Protein next to them so they can just fuel their body, fuel their brain. So you and I, my friend, one edit station at a time are going to change the world.
And even better for your listeners, with code OPTIMIZE on either a one-time purchase or that first subscribe and save order, 50% off. So if you do that subscribe and save, that's 20% off and 50% off with code OPTIMIZE. That's a fantastic deal.
If you're looking for a simple and affordable way to stay energetic, focused, and alleviate the chronic aches and pains that come from living at your computer, I recommend New Standard Whole Protein because it's sourced from high quality ingredients that I trust and it tastes great. To place your first order, visit optimizeyourself.me/newstandard and use the code OPTIMIZE for 50% off your first order. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast. To access the show notes for this and all previous episodes, as well as to subscribe so you don't miss future interviews just like this one, please visit optimizeyourself.me/podcast. And a special thanks to our sponsors Evercast and Ergo-Driven for making today's interview possible. To learn more about how to collaborate remotely without missing a frame and to get your real-time demo of Evercast in action, visit optimizeyourself.me/Evercast. And to learn more about Ergo-Driven and their brand new product that I'm super excited about, New Standard Whole Protein, visit optimizeyourself.me/newstandard. If you are inspired by today's interview and you would like to up your networking game so you can get the attention of the right people who can help open the right doors that lead you to a more fulfilling and rewarding career path, but your outreach email game is a bit weak, well, then I invite you to download my Insider's Guide to Writing Great Outreach Emails. In this extensive and free, by the way, guide, I'm going to teach you why cold outreach is the most important soft skill that you must develop if you want to advance your career, which is important now more than ever that we are all stuck at home and cannot network in person. I will also show you the 5 most common mistakes that people make when writing their outreach messages, and I will bet that you've made at least one of these yourself in the past. And then finally, I'm going to break down step by step in a simple to follow checklist how you can structure an amazing outreach message that is going to provide value to your recipients, help you build a lasting relationship instead of feeling like, you're just bothering this person, and actually get a response to your outreach so you can then seek advice, connect with a potential mentor, set up lunch meetings, and possibly even land your next gig. If you would like to download this brand new guide for free, just visit optimizeyourself.me/email guide. And that's all one word, no dashes, /email guide. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, healthy, and sane, and be well.